On page 31, there's an example of a government-wide statement of activities. Now, this statement of activities is, I guess I would compare it to an income statement for the entire government. But remember, the government's not really for profit, and we don't really call what they do net income. We're just trying to figure out what the city's net position is at the end of the fiscal year, right? And so we've got that over on the statement of net position, of course, but we do want to see how revenues are being raised and how expenditures are being made and how that ends up contributing to the net position, sort of like an income statement then plus the changes in owner's equity. So as you can see, then we have our changes in net position. So we come up with our new net position. Just like for a financial statements for a corporation, we would take net income, subtract dividends, and come up with a new retained earnings, right? So this is kind of how that works for the government. Instead of coming up with retained earnings, we're trying to come up with net position. All right. So this statement is combining the general governmental activities, right, and then the business type activities. So here's your governmental funds, here's your proprietary funds, and the information about them goes horizontally across. No fiduciary funds, because those fiduciary funds don't really belong to the government. All right. So, of course, the numbers for this come from the fund statements, and we already looked at the statement, the balance sheet, and the statement of net position for governmental and business activities. And in a similar way, those sets of funds have separate statements that we use to get this information. So the information from the governmental funds is all here, and the information from the proprietary funds is here in this area. They go across, and interestingly, unlike a income statement, which is revenues minus expenses equals net income, we start with the expenses and subtract out any, I guess, revenues, you might call them, the charges for services, any operational gains and contributions, and we come up with the net expense or revenue and the change in net position. So if you take this line for general government, it costs this much. We take out what we got, sort of what you might call revenue, fees and things, and then grants and taxes and any capital gains and contributions, and then that equals our total for government activities, right? So this minus this equals this. We carry it over here. Same thing all the way down. Come down to business activities. The expenses minus what we brought in equals our total, and then that. All right. So we're just totaling across, taking our expenses, subtracting out our revenues, and we're coming up with a total. And we reconcile it down here, adding up all our general revenues that aren't attributable to one of these, right? So all these totals are coming from each of your fund statements. So your governmental activities and your proprietary activities. If you look over at those, right? So here's the governmental, right? And so here's where you've got your revenues and your expenditures, right? So these numbers, again, need to get reconciled, right? Because they're not on accrual basis, so we reconcile that. And then these figures are going to come over here, right? And same thing with the proprietary funds, right? This doesn't have a reconciliation because these are kept on the accrual basis. So this information, and we'll look at these statements in a minute, but this information you'll see, obviously the totals, come over here, right? They come over here, and then that that gives us, so they match up. So this is kind of like your income statement and your statement of retained earnings combined into one, and it's broken out by the two types of funds and totaled.